an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Red Sister, chapters 19, 20, 21, 22. Did I do 23? No, 22. In these chapters, so it turns out maybe that whole prophecy thing isn't really what we all thought it was. I'm kind of into this. I kind of like this twist. Big fan of that sort of thing. Because prophecies are one of those things that, unless they're done really well, I tend to not care. And I'm sort of enjoying this uncertainty. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Welcome to Martin, who is in the chat, and thank you for commissioning this. I'm looking at how far along I am in the book, and as of the end of chapter 22, I would be just shy of halfway. So there is a lot to happen still, and I have no idea what to expect. There are some surprises buried in this section. There's a lot. So, all right, let's start it off because I don't want to miss anything. Chapter 19. Nona is waking up and is not in awesome shape. She has to sleep to recover from the injury that she sustained from the arrow going through her shoulder. And Abbess Glass is also not doing awesome. I mean, this woman burned through her hand. I am extremely curious about how much dexterity she will ever recover in it because, you know, we flash forward in this section ahead about 2 years, and recovery, whatever recovery there shall be, would be complete by then. And I don't feel like we get a really good idea. We just know that there's like a ton of scar tissue, but we don't, I think, get a really good idea of exactly how much she can do with it. But we will talk about that flash forward when we get there. So the abbess, after Nona is awake enough in the hospital ward to recover, to sit up and have a conversation, the abbess decides to talk to her about what's going on. And she says, "Your name has been spoken before the emperor in his throne room, Nona. Did you know that?" And Nona's like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, well, a high priest just lost his fucking job because of you. So yeah, some people are going to be talking about you, just saying." And this is when we really get a look at just how much tactic the abbess utilized when she was figuring out exactly how to handle the high priest. To summarize, this bitch knew just how everybody was going to act. It's almost frightening how predictable everybody was because she played them like a fucking flute. It was bonkers. So she's describing about how Thorn Taxis was summoned to court and told to basically put aside his grievance, and that he promised to do it. He made an oath that he would. And I really appreciated the abbess because when, understandably, Nona expresses some doubt as to whether he meant it or not, the abbess says, "Thorn Taxis is a cold and ruthless man. He would murder 1,000 small girls if they stood in the way of his ambition, but he is not a mad dog. Oaths are not lightly given to the emperor. He will move on. Our Lord Taxis has bigger fish to fry than you, novice, and this matter has already set him back. Don't forget him, though, for he will surely not forget you." So yeah, I really like this detail about the fact that it's the fact that this guy, it's not that he's giving up because he's giving up. It's he's giving up because he's recognizing it's not in his interest to keep on beating at this drum. He should just shift his attention to something else. And if he at some point has an opportunity to get back at her in another way, should she still be alive and in his way, in any way, you know, like there's no question later on that he would not consider this to be an opportunity to take, but he also wouldn't be able to be tied to this oath anymore the same way, because you could say that it wasn't related at all. Martin says in the last chapter, when she says politicking has never been my forte, the Arkans all laugh. I'm pretty sure they knew she played them. Yeah, I suspect that too, because all the Arkans seem intelligent. Like I said, it was what was so refreshing was that they aren't a bunch of idiots. And there's no way they don't realize. I almost feel like they all wanted to get rid of the high priest as well and sort of let her play them, because they were just like, yeah, I see what you're doing, but you know what? I'm kind of here for it. So yeah, let's let this play out and see what, if he like does get as predictable as I think he's going to get. And he did. That was his own fault, you know? He let her play him, and he was too fucking self-absorbed to realize that was what was happening. So Nona asks if the old nun really talked about her 100 years ago, and the abbess just says no. And Nona is like, wait, what? Because she's like not wanting it to be true, but she's also started to sort of get used to the idea, and so now she's being put on a whole other track. She says, but they said Sister Agatha was a famous holy witch. And the abbess says there's no such thing as prophecy. Well, yeah, there is, but they're crazy. People who were once listened to for their wisdom and have found themselves growing old and unwise, yet still want to be heard. Magic doesn't work that way. So she tells her finally, I'm going to tell you the truth about all of this. However, when I do that, you've got to promise me that you're not going to go telling people, because this is something that we kind of need to keep to ourselves, and you'll see why. So she tells her, Sister Agatha was kind of a hot mess, and did a lot of shit, but she never ever made prophecies. That's not something that she was known for. The Agatha prophecy, and I could almost picture her making quotes around her head when she says this, was the work of two Arkans about 35 years ago, when the emperor's grandfather was on the throne. They were troubled times. The prophecy gave us focus. It reminded us of the salvation the ancestor promised us. It reminded us that the ark could be opened and would be opened, and that we owned it together. Nona asks what's inside. She's like, nobody knows. That's not really the point. The trouble is, so many people claim to know how to open it, and their claims are so varied that it's hard to know which, if any, are correct. A lot of people believe, or not that claim know how to open it, claim they know what's inside. A lot of people claim that it can control the moon. And we find out later that the moon is falling. This is something that is mentioned to her. And this makes sense because it was something that was launched into orbit. And, if you don't have the perfect tools, and if you don't construct the thing perfectly, eventually it'll fucking come down. So that's understandable. And the fact that they think that it can control the moon, maybe you could get it back up again. This is all that's holding the ice back. At this point, they barely have enough room to live. And once that shit falls, it's going to get real very, very quickly. The point is, the prophecy told us that the key lay among us, among our children or the children yet to be. I believed it, heart and soul. I was a young woman then, and zealous. She managed to smile, though pain still haunted her eyes. In any event, it served its purpose. I didn't learn the truth until I became abbess here and had access to the sanctioned histories. It doesn't matter much now, but this is not a tale that should spread. I'm trusting you, Nona, and that's a burden rather than a gift. Do you understand that? But didn't the high priest know? The archons too? And she says, well, Jacob doesn't really read. And he doesn't really listen to other people. So, no, he never noticed. The archons, I think Anasta knew. Philo probably also knew, which Philo, even if he didn't know, I have no doubt Philo just assumes it's not real because Philo just sees the worst in everything and doom everywhere. So I 100% see that he would just be like, yeah, that prophecy. Yeah, that doesn't mean anything. Nevis, perhaps not, or perhaps like Sister Wheel, they know, but choose to believe anyway, which is interesting. That's just a really freaky thing about people that I never appreciated until the last 10 years, that we can in our hearts know what we believe is not real and choose to ignore the fact that we know better. I don't love that about human beings, guys. This is really a fucked up thing that we do, and I just don't like knowing this. So Nona's like, well, then if this isn't true, why did you save me? Because, like, that was supposed to be the whole thing, that I'm, like, the fulfillment of this prophecy. And the abbess says, well, you heard what I told the archons. It was enough for them to find me innocent. And when Nona brings up the vision, she's like, bitch, I lied. I made it up. You got to do that sometimes. You just got to lie sometimes. You didn't like the high priest. No. He was a thorn in your side. More like a knife in my kidney. And you don't like Thurin Taxis. No. And now Thurin doesn't have the high priest as a friend. He doesn't have the high priest in his pocket, no. For all his faults, Nevis will not sell himself so cheaply as Jacob did. Why are you telling me these things? And that's a fair question. Basically, the abbess is like treating her like an equal. And, remind her she's 10. So it's understandable that Nona kind of reaches a point where she's like, hold on a second. The fuck are you telling me all this for? She almost thinks that maybe the abbess is just fucking with her. And you know what, guys? Don't you wish more people in authority positions would have these sorts of frank conversations with children? Like, sometimes we want children to continue to live in the world that we wish was true, because if we can watch them enjoying this better version of the world, it makes us feel better temporarily. And we can sort of project our desire to go back to before we knew what we know onto them and experience that in a way. So I feel like there's a lot of moments where adults try and act like, oh, they're too young to know. You're going to, spoil their childhood or force them to grow up too fast or XYZ. And the truth is, I think a lot of the time adults say that stuff when really they're worried about they themselves missing out on something with that child continuing to believe a lie. And it's really tough to tell, because there are times where I do agree a kid's maybe too young to hear a certain thing, or, but I think adults tend to underestimate exactly how much children pick up on when things are happening around them. Not all children. It's not something that every kid is so perceptive. And if you can choose to not believe a thing that you know to be true as an adult, you sure fucking can do that as a kid. But I know for me, there were a lot of things that my parents both assumed I wasn't aware of as a kid about their relationship with one another that I was fully fucking aware of, like, years and years earlier. And oftentimes, while this kind of conversation feels really difficult and like you're taking something away from the child, and maybe you are, you're still giving them something else to replace it with. Having the knowledge of the facts is not something to be underestimated, especially when you're somebody like Nona, who is in a position where she might be in this community now and might be being looked after finally, but she has had to go through the world looking after herself mostly. And it's not like that's not still a possibility for her at some point in the future. So a kid that has fended for themselves so much deserves, I think, a little bit more in the way of reality and honesty. And some kids are better equipped to cope with the truth than others, and you have to assess that as well. You know, a lot of the coping tools that they have are dependent on whether they've had to fend for themselves before. So this is, you know, she explains about the fact that, because Nona asks, if y'all hated the high priest so much, why didn't they just like vote him out? And she's like, well, the Arkans have to like have a vote all together. They never get together. Having 4 here at once the way we did is super duper rare. And they needed a reason to throw him out that was more substantial and better. Like there was more proof of the fact that he had to be in somebody's pocket for him to have chosen the actions that he did. So she says, declaring me guilty would make him look weak. A man like him can't afford to look weak, that he's just saying, oh, she's guilty and just do it. He had to get the Arkans to agree. And he overestimated how much sway he held over them. He thought that all of them might like be against him but one. But if he just had the one, he would still be fine. And it turns out that he didn't have the one. And she says, well, you burned yourself, though, even though you knew it wouldn't help. And then Nona realizes, oh, my God, you burned yourself because you knew that would make me take the challenge. How did you know I would make it through the challenge, though? And the abbess is like, Sister Tallow saw you at the blade. And we knew that if you were able to fuck up Ramal Taxis that bad, you were probably pretty gifted and really fast. So I didn't know, basically, is what she's saying. I didn't know that you would make it through, but I was making a pretty solid bet. And I love this. This line has been underlined, according to Kindle, by 185 readers. Abbess Glass was neither fast nor strong. She had no obvious wealth. Her office held no great sway. And yet with her truth and with her lies, she had turned one wheel against another, and in due course mountains had moved, the mighty had fallen, and the world sang the song she chose for it. So, you know, and it says right after that, Nona didn't know how she felt about that, which is fucking the right way to feel. It's correct. Like, it would be very easy to be like, just straight up impressed and be like, wow, that's awesome. But when you remember that, like, maybe Abbess Glass isn't the only one with this kind of talent, then you're sort of left cold and going, oh, God, this means that, like, lots of people could do things this way and not look like they're particularly of significance in the world and yet be managing shit. And that is fucking frightening. Like, guys, yeah. Nona had no loyalty to either Glass or her church now, and perhaps that was just another of the abbess's wheels turning. But the time to run had passed her by. She had called Clara and Hessa friends, and that bond ran deeper than blood. It was the foundation of a world that she could understand, a faith that mattered. Martin's in the chat. Sister Tallow calling someone impressive is a pretty big compliment, I feel. Yeah. What is someone evil had that talent? Oh, what if someone evil had that talent? Well, yeah, it's not even a what if. It's what evil person has it. Because they do. Like, there has to be somebody with that kind of talent for evil to continue to exist in the world the way that it does. I can name a few right off the top of my head, but we won't get into that. So, chapter 20. Clara and Ruli come to talk to Nona, and they're both kind of like, I don't know still how much to trust Clara. Ruli is a little bit shy about seeing Nona again, and I almost see it as like her being like, oh my God, you're such a big deal now. But Clara is immediately hugging her and being really chatty and smiling at her. And I'm kind of like, is she really that eager and happy to see Nona? Or does she recognize that Nona is a valuable piece in a puzzle for her? Because Clara just feels super calculating to me. But we'll see. So they're talking about, let's see, Valera came in. She's the younger sister, but that never stopped her complaining that her brother sits on the throne. She had Lord Jotsis on her arm, yada, yada, yada. All of this like gossip. And then Hessa comes in. And we find out something really fucked up, which is that when Hessa shared her memories with Nona, it linked the two of them somehow. And she actually felt like a bunch of the things that happened. She doesn't like, we don't find that out here. She's just telling her here about like, I didn't even see the thing get thrown. And all of a sudden you were like, but later on we find out that, you know, there's a school bully basically that starts to beat up Nona, and poor Hessa in like a whole other class can feel all of the blows. And it's just like super unfair because, I mean, this girl is going to be getting in a lot of fights like this. And it just seems really mean that now Hessa has to be subjected to all of this. Like, just, it's not fair, man. Girl's already disabled. Like, can we not? But there it is. So Jula came to Nona more cautiously, hugging her as if she might break, her short hair bristly against Nona's cheek. As they parted, her lower lip trembled. Thank the ancestor, you're all right. I thought, and she starts crying and Nona's just like, what? So at this point, Nona is sort of worried about the, let's see, her body had let her down and failed her when she most needed it. So she's talking about the fact that the first two ordeals she was able to do, and then she like literally passed out and had to be slapped awake and pulled up onto her feet. And Sister Rose is just like, are you fucking kidding me? Yeah, of course that happened. You like, you can't sustain that kind of like fight back with no energy being burnt. She calls it the Hunska burn. You're using up your resources when you do those things. And you're all bones anyhow. What have you got to burn? I'm amazed you managed to do what you did. Most Hunska are ready to fall over after just a few seconds of fighting at speed. Drinking sugar water after helps, but there's only so much your body can give. Take too much and something will break. With Hunska, it's normally the heart. Not that you last long one way or the other. And Nona sits up and is like, I'm sorry. What did you just say? And Sister Rose is like, oh, God, they haven't gone over that with you yet, huh? Fuck. Okay, so here's the thing. 4 different tribes. The Hunska and the Garant live short lives. It says 1 too fast for their hearts in this land, the other too large. Sister Tallow is the oldest Hunska I've known, and she isn't as old as she looks, not by a long margin. The Quantal and Marjal draw on the power of place, tapping into the magics that lie beneath and above and through all the things of this world. But this is not the land that bred them, and its magics are sharp, quick to burn the unwary or warp them. Those that burn short, burn bright. The shortest lives can cast the longest shadows. And, you know, that's a fucked up way to learn that. She's trying to be, like, encouraging, but, like, you can't just tell somebody, well, you know, you're going to die pretty young, but don't worry about it. You're probably going to do something important. Like, ouch, you know? So Sister Pan has asked to see Nona and Arabella. And this starts this interesting thing where Arabella and Nona kind of become friends. And I use that word, like, carefully. It's more that Arabella is, like, not as awful as Nona originally thought. I can't remember who it was that said earlier, she can't help that she was born rich. That's pretty much the conclusion that Nona starts to come to. It's just like, yeah, you know what? The money and everything, of course, it's affected, like, how she sees the world. But she's actually a pretty likable person. So it turns out that they're going to the naming. And Arabella is like, you know that Sister Kettle wasn't named Sister Kettle by her mother. And Nona's like, yeah, but the older novices still have all of their names. And she says, yes, but they all have their holy names. They just have to keep them secret until they take their orders and become nuns, if they get that far. Every novice gets to choose their name in front of the mistress path when she calls them. She calls most of them during their first year. And so they decide, it turns out that they are going to have to share what names they're choosing in front of one another, because Ara, as she has told Nona to call her, is the chosen one, and Nona is the shield, and they should not hide things from one another. And there's this interesting moment here where Ara... So, let's see. I take the east door. Why? That's where the path leads me. Try it. Close your eyes and see. That's what Sister Pan says. Nona closed her eyes. She saw only what she always saw, orange and gray, after images pulsing and fading, the last traces shaped into ideas and suggestions, the edges of dreams. Do you see it? Ara, almost at her ear. No. Look harder. A hand touched Nona's shoulder, and in that moment what she saw became an edged brilliance and a hot darkness, one cutting through the other like a fracture, though she couldn't say which cut the other, and both driven through her head hammer hard, splintering against the back of her skull. So she fucking passes out again, kind of, at least falls to the ground. And Ara yanks her to her feet, freaking out, thinking that she put her hand on Nona's injured shoulder, and that's why Nona fell. But the truth is she yanked Nona up by her injured arm. She put her hand on the uninjured shoulder, and this happened. So what the fuck was that? I am assuming that there is something about their touching that caused this to happen. I don't really know what this means. I'm not going to try and even theorize because I don't really get it. I don't know if it's supposed to be that they're sort of like the dark and the light, like two halves of the same whole that sort of complete each other when they are together, if that's what it's supposed to be. And it's not when they say that, like, when such and such, say together, that they thought it was like one from each tribe, and then they thought, oh, it's all in one person. Maybe it's two people who are like supposed to be the duality of man kind of thing. I don't know. But anyway, so they go inside and they are made to tell Arabella, or Arabella and Nona are made to tell Sister Pan what they are going to choose together. And Arabella doesn't really want to say in front of Nona, which is interesting. I guess it's just like, really for her, it's more about the tradition and knowing that it's not usually done this way. I don't think it's just not trusting Nona, but I don't know. So this is when they hear about the moon falling, and then Nona gets asked what she's going to pick for her name, and she realizes that she hasn't thought about it at all. And she picks the name Cage. And then Arabella says Sister Thorn. And I was like, oh, what? Because I think I, assumed, of course, as many people would, I'm sure, that the nun in the first scene is Nona. What? It's not. And then we jump into part 2, grade class, and it starts off with a return to that opening scene. And we get reminded just who Sister Thorn is. And it's a pretty knowing who she is now just changes the context of everything. Your death has not been waiting for your arrival at the appointed hour. It has, for all the years of your life, been racing towards you with the fierce velocity of time's arrow. It cannot be evaded. It cannot be bargained with, deflected, or placated. All that is given to you is the choice. Meet it with open eyes and peace in your heart. Go gentle to your reward. Or burn bright, take up arms, and fight the bitch. And it turns out that she's going to be fighting up against fucking Toxis. He's the one who brought this like army of mercenaries. I don't know. Martin's asking, what do you think of this scene? And I was like about to be like, I don't know what to think of this now. I really don't. Like, I feel like anybody who's fighting Toxis has to be the good guy. But then she fucking looks up and here comes apparently Sister Cage. It could be another person, but if I find out later that she says, no, don't, and the CA wasn't for Cage, I'm going to feel pretty manipulated. So fingers crossed, that's not what winds up happening here. And we get a sick-ass fight scene. Honestly, fight scenes, I don't know. I've never tried to write one. But I've read a lot of ones that are like either just really confusing or just not really that gripping. There's a lot of books in which the fight scenes I've kind of skimmed, to be honest. But this was pretty awesome. I really liked this. And she like takes down fucking hundreds of people. Like just fucking boom, 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 boom. And I love this moment where she's like facing off with more of them and they think that she's going to run. And she does run, but she runs at them, not away from them. Thorn straightens, snarling against the pain of broken ribs. Someone is leaving the Palarthi ranks. A woman. Sister? Thorn's vision is blurred with blood, with sweat, with exhaustion. The woman is not Palarthi, but she holds a second spear. Thorn blinks and in that moment recognizes one who was once her sister. It is important when killing a nun to ensure that you bring an army of sufficient skill. The dark-haired woman hoists her spear. Don't do it! The spear is thrown. Yeah, that's true. Martin's pointing out it's not C-A, it's C, which, true. But I guess we'll see. I want, honestly, for Arabella and Cage to be buds. I'm calling her Cage now. You see this? Nona isn't Nona. She's Cage. Cage suits her so much better. I don't want to call her Sister Cage either. Cage. Just boom. Done. But, I mean, she doesn't say, don't do it, Sister blank. She says, don't do it. So maybe it's Clara. It might be. Because Clara just seems real shady. I'm just saying. We've been saying, I'm going to keep saying, Clara feels like she could be a Abbess Glass at some point. She seems like the kind of person who keeps her eyes open, watches how people are, what they do, what their weaknesses are, the things that they like and dislike about other people, and files all that shit away. This is the kind of thing that I can picture myself having been good at had I had less empathy. I am, in a way, too empathetic at times where I wind up not allowing myself to put boundaries up or demand what I deserve because I am so overly aware of the other person being in a difficult position and worrying about how they're feeling and doing. And it's weird because I can also be really mean. So I have a lot of empathy, and then there are times where that's fucking gone, and I can just say some shit, and just everybody will stop and look at me and be like, I can't believe you fucking said that. And I'm just like, whoops, sorry. It's just kind of, yeah, now that I listen back to what I just said, that was fucked up. But when it comes to, that's like more of an on impulse thing. When it comes to sitting back and like really looking at the big picture, I tend to be pretty good at reading people. It's part of what makes me good at this job. But I don't have the ability to like let folks suffer or make them suffer on purpose to achieve another thing. And like Abbess puts herself through hell in order to achieve her goal here and holds her hand over that flame. I don't think I could do that either. I don't know. I mean, it depends on what's at stake. And I didn't really mention this earlier, but I really do love the concept of this prophecy is real and Abbess Glass is lying and telling her that it's not real, which would be kind of dope. Because what better way? It's like fucking The Matrix, right? Where she's like, sorry, you're not the one. What are you going to do? I know that you really want to hear that you're the one. And I know that he wants to hear you're the one, but you're not. You can't like tell somebody you are destined for greatness and have them not fucking like kind of let that go to their head. You've just got to be like, no, that shit's made up. That's nothing. Just live your life. I kind of see that. So we'll see. I would prefer if the prophecy just weren't real at all for real, because I just mostly don't like prophecies. But if it's played out like this, where she like lied and said it wasn't real, I'm kind of cool with that. And it, you know, then it can be real, but turned around a little. So then we go back to school, and it's been 2 years, and this whole thing is really like going along at a clip. I didn't think that we were going to jump ahead in time quite this fast. And I should have, because with the way that it opens with that fight scene, I should have known that we were going to have to like advance, you know, at least like 5 or 6 years, maybe more. So it had been academia that held Nona back the longest, though she loved both the subject and Sister Rule. Nona had even mastered the much-hated Saints' Days ceremonies and catechism in spirit under Sister Wheel's unforgiving eye before she passed her academia finals. It had been the writing more than the reading that defeated her for so long, the business of wrestling her thoughts into a wriggling white scrawl of lines across the test slate. Yo, wrestling your thoughts in order to write sounds like some shit that that sounds real. That sounds like something that this author might have some real understanding of in an intimate way. And I just really liked that line and how it was worded. So Sister Flint tells them about grade class. I provide individual tuition in subjects you may experience difficulty with. And there's this interesting thing. She says, today we'll finish a quarter hour early. I shall leave you to introduce yourself to new classmates and gossip with old ones. She looks out the window and leaves the class. So as soon as she leaves, everybody starts talking. And there are a bunch of people like milling around talking to one another. And they're discussing the fact that like, Flint was on about girls getting their blood. It was vile, which, yeah, they're going to be right around that age. I got my period at 9, which is just fucking mean and rude. And y'all, there's no reason for that. It's just, I hate it. Ruined my childhood. So let's see. Oh, right. Nona opened her mouth to say that Jula just needed her shade stamp and the test was scheduled for next 4 day, but a shadow fell across her and the words stayed where they were. So, here's Darla. Darla is not somebody to fuck with. Darla is a big girl. She's big and strong and a bully and generally got the drop on Nona, like in a big way. And this is an important lesson for Nona because she has, I think, gotten used to the idea of being so fast that that's sort of like all the advantage that she needs. And she realizes as she's being essentially crushed because Darla picks her up and her feet are no longer touching the ground, that because somebody was able to sneak up on her and grab her without her being aware they were there, her speed doesn't do jack shit for her now. There's only so much you can do up against an opponent who is wildly strong and just bigger than you and, you know, has the surprise attack. So what she does is breaks Darla's finger. And it doesn't cause her to completely avoid getting hit. Like, Darla's reaction to her finger being broken is to punch Nona in the face. So, yeah, that's like, it's not the end of the matter. But it is a dampener. Darla, I think, would have continued on with beating her if it weren't for the fact that her fucking hand hurt so bad. And also, I think, doesn't Nona do something to her foot as well? I feel like she breaks her toes somehow. And yeah, the teacher comes back in and is like, Darla, what happened to your finger? And, that's it. Thank you, Martin. She dodges out of the way and Darla kicks the wall. Sucks. Nothing worse than hurting yourself like that, and you did it to yourself. That's insult to injury in a most literal way. So Darla gets sent to the sanatorium and hobbles out. And I fully expect that Sister Tallow knew what the fuck she was doing. Sister Tallow knows that Nona is super fast and is like, you know what she hasn't learned yet, though? And she walks away to give Darla the chance to get the drop on her because she knows how Darla do, and she wants to see how Nona handles the situation. I think Tallow's a shady bitch. And yeah, Nona, you too. You look like you've had the worst of it. I feel fine, mistress. She spat a crimson mess to the floor and showed Mistress Blade a fierce and bloody grin. I've waited 2 years to have you show me blade lore. I'm ready now. That is baller. Because I'll tell you right now, guys, not me. Thank you very much. So yeah, Nona's puzzling over the fact that she managed to get away, but still got pretty badly injured and is still hurt. And Clara is just like, what the fuck did you let her just walk away for? You should have beat the shit out of her. And Nona is just like, listen, this really isn't that big a deal. Apparently, like, Darla says to her that she does this with practically every student, like that there's somebody that she picks out of the class that she fucks up. And she says, I took a few kicks, and in exchange, I don't have to watch my back or worry about Darla poisoning my food. She'll remember she beat me, so she won't carry a grudge. She'll remember it hurt, so she'll convince herself she doesn't need to do it again. Which I really like. That's exactly the balance. Some people, you need to let them think that they won. And I hate that. I don't really like to let people think they won when they didn't. I am very prideful. And the idea of them believing that they really bested me when I kind of let them is anathema to my personality, but it's also fucking necessary. Like, you've got to sometimes let that slide. And also now she knows a little bit more about Darla and where her, like, line is, you know? And, like, Hessa is telling her at this point about how she felt everything. Let's see. Hessa says she's certainly been bitten, and with that, she took herself off across the hall, the swing of her leg, leaving a dashed line alongside each of her single footprints. I really enjoy that. The descriptions, like, reminding us that she's fucking, like, disabled, but she's moving. She's taking care of her business, you know? When Darla had knocked Hessa to the floor and set her foot to Hessa's face, Nona had in that moment shared her skin, the mixture bubbling before her in shade glass, forgotten and unseen. So this is part of the reason why she was like, oh yeah, I'm going to break this bitch's finger. Like, she was getting back at her for an attack on Hessa as well. So they are going out here to grab some weapons for this class, right? And we have a speech from Sister Tallow about fighting with weapons versus without weapons, that having blood on your blade is a failure. Often the failure of the sister who holds the sword. sometimes of those who send her into conflict, or sometimes the failure lies years back in the hands of someone who missed an opportunity for peace, who saw a chance to avert a distant violence and did not take it, or who failed to see that chance. I spend a red class, that's 2 years for most of you, on unarmed combat. One reason I make you dangerous without a weapon and will continue to reinforce that training is so you have an alternative to this. And I really liked this, the whole intro of just being like, yeah, I don't want you to even need this. If you need it, you're going to get trained. But ideally, you don't have to do this. So she says, equip yourselves, but remember where your blade is and what it will cut if you fall. So Nona is last into the room with all of the armories, whatnots. And as she is going in there, Nona sees a dark figure continue to the blade path chamber, and she's thinking that it looks like Kettle. But the hard-eyed stare held nothing of the nun's humor. This is a weird thing, and I'm not really sure what to think about this. It wasn't clear where the girls had taken their knives from. At the far end of the chamber, a bewildering array of weapons lined the shelves, hilts out, ready for the taking. Nona passed by the racks. She hurried to the furthest corner. Kneeling, she reached up beneath the lowest shelf, stretching. Her fingers found only space, and for a moment she thought it had been discovered at last. One more stretch, cheek hard against the shelf's edge, and she found the hilt. A tug brought it free. So she runs back, and this is the knife, I will remind you all, that she found lodged in the headboard of her bed. And the one that the sisters had, like, later on, they discussed that they all assumed this assassin had been sent to take care of Arabella, but it's looking more and more like they were sent for Nona. And this whole time, Nona saw Arabella tried to kill her. And I was just like, girl, it feels really clear to me that's not what happened. I just keep on being baffled that you thought that. But okay, sure. And I can't tell by the end of this if she's really, like, totally aware that Arabella didn't try and kill her, if she's still, like, harboring something there. So they're about to, because Sister Tallow is talking about the blades themselves, the fact that they are going to need to, if they are unarmed, really take into account the, like, weight and size of their opponent. And we really just learned that lesson. And she also tells them, you have no idea how sharp this motherfucker is. Like, basically, y'all are going to think that you can play. You cannot. This shit will go deep and it will fuck you up irrevocably faster than you have even time to, like, notice it's happened. And you need to take this shit seriously. Like, we're going to actually be practicing on animals later so that you can get a sense of just how little pressure it even takes to break skin. Like, it's nothing. Which I think is super important, and I liked that a lot. So it's time for them all to pair up, and Sister Tallow pairs up with Nona. And they're beginning to do this, and let's see. Ara pulled her blade back from the rags, dark as ink, and grinned at Nona, making an exaggerated slow-motion thrust at her. Nona found she couldn't echo the smile, remembering that the knife in her hand had once been a death threat. Even so, she lifted the knife in response to Ara's thrust. In that instant, something exploded from the base of the wall where nothing had been but shadows. A figure, moving with breathtaking swiftness, devouring the scant yards between them before Nona fully turned her head to see. The ground leapt up, and Nona found her bruised body pinned to it, her attacker on top of her, securing her by both wrists. So, it is Sister Kettle. Like, she had thought it was Kettle, and she was like, no, she looks crazy. That's not Kettle. Nope, it totally fucking is. And Kettle holds up Nona's hand and is like, yeah, so she's got this fucking assassin knife. What's that about? And I think it's Wheel. Yeah, Wheel is like, oh, she's in league with the assassin. And Tallow is like, fucking, no, she's not. They've shared a dorm room for ages. If she was supposed to, like, be killing Arabella, she'd have fucking done it by now. The threads led us here. Sister Wheel looked up at Tallow, indignant. Not just me, Flint and Kettle too. So the threads, no idea. I'm very curious, but no idea. So they ask her where she got the knife. And Nona is so fucking cagey about it. Listen, her name is her name. Cage for a reason. And just doesn't really want to tell them about everything. And they're all very aware that she's not telling them everything. They're trying to sort of piece together from what they can get out of her the actual truth. And Sister Tallow says, I've seen the twin to this knife before and its triplet. In the belt of a woman I pulled from the wall of your dormitory on the second night you spent in this convent. And it's a Noi Gwyn. The Noi Gwyn are apparently a group of people. I'm not sure if they're a different race, if it's just a different, but this is something that rings a bell to Nona. She knows what it means. And she is looking at the knife and realizing that, more than 2 years ago, she went and hid it. And she still doesn't really understand why she hid it. And knows that she, set it aside from the others because it seemed wrong to keep it amongst all of the, ordinary knives. And Sister Tallow tells about how, she grabbed the woman up. Then there was a second assassin, and she beat the shit out of him. He was in no condition to answer her questions, and the other one escaped. And when Nona says it was in the storeroom, Sister Tallow is like, fuck you, it was in the storeroom. I fucking inventory that shit all the damn time. No, it was not. Don't you lie to me. And we know it was, but she purposely put it somewhere that it could not be inventoried, that it was not with the others. So this whole thing back and forth with well, I put it there because Abbess Glass told me to put it there. And they're like, why would she do that? She's just not being straight with them about it, right? And we thought the assassins came for Arabella, but it looks as though they were here for Nona. The Noi Gwyn are anything but cheap, but perhaps Thorin Toxis found their prices more reasonable than those of the High Court judge whose arrival followed their failure. Ancestor knows what funds Toxis put behind the visit of our own High Priest and Archons after that. So, at this point, let's see. The Argatha comes to us out of stories, and even if the stories about those stories differ, they all agree that they came from the mouths of the holy. A nun, a priest for this purpose or that purpose. The story exists. That is enough. I have faith in it. And Sister Tallow asks Nona, did the knife look as if it had been thrown there? And Nona is thinking back and imagining what she originally did, which is that Arabella had come up to her and stabbed it into the bed. And then she realizes the angle wasn't right, that the angle of it had to have been thrown from the window. And when Sister Wheel is like, why would you keep that a secret? Sister Tallow sort of defends her and is like, she didn't keep it secret. The abbess knew. And I'm like, but the abbess didn't know. Not really. She didn't. But it's still sort of this acts as a bit of a shield to Nona. So the Noi Gwyn do not like to fail, and they are patient. Besides, now Thorin Taxis has sworn on this matter, Nona is a liability to him, and his enemies might have an interest in seeing her harmed, thinking to bring the Emperor's wrath on the house of Taxis. And so this blade. And at this point, Nona interrupts and is like, y'all just came from nowhere. Where did you guys come from? How did you get here? And Kettle says, I'm a sister of discretion. You see me when I want you to. Threads brought us here, Nona. Sister Flint peering down from her grave heights. Mistress Path will teach you about threads soon enough. Now you're in gray class. So, yeah, that's the end of that section. I think. Is it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the spot that I stopped. But yeah, I feel like that was plenty for this episode. this is just the threads thing. I'm so curious about. I just really want to know what that means. Like, what when they say the threads led us here, what is that? Oh, sorry, Martin's writing all this stuff. She dodged on tile casually talking about taking on 2 assassins. Yeah, no joke. So do you think Darla will be an enemy or become a sort of friend like Ara seems to be? I don't know. I could see somebody like Darla who tends to bully people after being put in her place becoming friendlier. But it sort of depends on what her pride is like and how everybody else treats her afterwards. Like, if she is super duper prideful and it seems like everybody else is sort of laughing behind their hands at her, I could see that being kind of too much for her to take and just like really resenting that. But if it seems like everybody's just kind of forgotten about it because Nona also got hers, it's not like she got away completely unscathed. That might be enough for her to sort of soften, you know? I don't know. So yeah, this is just, there's just a lot about, and I still don't know what ship hearts are, which I'm dying to know about. They keep like bringing them up. So I don't know what that's about. And I'm just really like, there's a lot of little moments that that are dropped here and there in conversation in a way that is not at all. It's treated as if it's all taken for granted that we know this stuff already. And I'm just like really interested in getting the details on some of this stuff, you know? Martin says, at the intermission scene, do you think it's Clara or Cage that takes down Ara? Pick one so I can laugh privately until you find out. I'm going to say Clara for now. It might be somebody that we haven't even met yet. But for now, I'm going to go with Clara because she just seems like so, like she's really like being positioned as somebody to not trust. But, you know, it could be somebody still else. I don't know. I'm reading, I just like jumped to chapter 22 and I totally did read chapter 22. I forgot because this is a lot of like battles training stuff, which tends to stick with me a little bit less, I guess. But I did enjoy the fact that like Nona is being trained to use certain, like she's doing certain movements and then she keeps trying to do like a variation on it. And Sister Tallow is like, will you fucking stop it? You need to learn the movement as I am teaching it to you so well that it becomes absolutely automatic. There has to be muscle memory here that you don't even think about anymore. And this is just how you move. And let's see. Oh yeah. Nona's going up against Ara. And she like cuts across her stomach with a black line because they're using like these weapons that have and realizes how guilty she feels all of a sudden that she thought that this girl had been gonna stab her to death in her sleep. And she's like, oh shit, I was totally wrong about you. And you can join the others for 10 minutes before next bell. Nona straightened, blinking sweat from her eyes. Time had escaped her, but the blisters on her knife hand and the circle of floor kicked free of sand had kept a more accurate measure than her mind. Which I like that. And the like idea of it, like this circle of sand is like a clock almost. It's weird. So it's great you came up. Ara finished with the last tie and stripped off her blade habit in one fluid motion. I was getting worried we wouldn't range together. We've still got 3 months for that. So she and Ara have become like pretty good friends. I hope more of the others make it up before then too. We need Ruli and Jula at least, Nona nodded. It'll be the first time I've got off this rock since I arrived here. So, I hope, oh, right. And I forgot Ara's hair is finally growing out. I keep forgetting that she got her head shaved. The poor thing. That's really like awful though, especially when it's cold all the time. Like those of you who have had long and short hair, I shaved my head once, and I couldn't believe how fucking cold I was all the time. Scarves became part of my, like, permanent, my wardrobe, even in the summertime. Out on the path itself, Clara, still in her blade habit, wobbled dangerously as she attempted the first rise of the spiral. And this causes Clara to, like, misplace her foot and fall. And Era is trying to be like, well, you did have your foot in the wrong spot, but it is sort of like Clara wouldn't have twitched and checked if her foot hadn't been, if it hadn't been brought to her attention by Ara. So Nona goes out there and does the whole resin thing and begins this path. And she goes out, and the net wants you, little girl. The pale novice. Darla wants you too, Alada called. So, yeah, this is starting to be like people are gathering around watching everything. The pendulum swung past its midpoint. Some yards ahead, a heavy section of the blade path rotated on a joint, reacting to the shifting of Nona's weight on the spiral. I can't lie. I want to see this so bad on screen. Like, this is so wild sounding to me. And I just can't imagine how hard this is. This is like an American Gladiators thing on steroids. Nona dropped into the moment, slowing the world to a crawl. A slow hunt for balance in the space between heartbeats. Somehow it ended as it so often ended, with Nona understanding that she had passed the point of no return, knowing that no lunge could save her now, and letting gravity take her. She fell without sound, just a silent snarl across her lips. The impact with the net, the bounce, the scramble to the side, all passed without notice. She knew she could walk the blade path, knew it blood to bone, and yet... Bad luck. Clara wrapped an arm around Nona. You're getting better, though. I'm not. Let's watch Ara fall, Clara grinned, or just get old watching her finishing it. A novice, nearly as tall as Darla but half her width, pulled the lever on the wall, trapping the pendulum at the end of a swing and setting the dial back to 0. So, then we go to chapter 23. So that's where I ended it. I just keep on messing that up. But yeah, so I am curious about that as well, because it seems like something that I would have thought if she were really pushing herself and not constantly holding back the way she was at the beginning, where she was worried that people wouldn't like her if she was too good at stuff. I really thought then she would be able to complete it, but it seems not. So that's interesting also. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this book. Thank you very much to Martin for commissioning it. And yeah, I'm very excited to see what winds up happening here, because like, I still don't know, I'm still not totally sure what the goal is here. Like, even with something else that's like a lot of politics, like Song of Ice and Fire, for example, everybody's after the throne. And there's like the White Walkers that are the threat, but the throne is like the main thing for so many people who don't believe the White Walkers exist, even though we as readers know it's going to come down to the White Walkers eventually. This is something that I'm not sure what anybody wants or what the story is really building towards in terms of people's goals. So, yeah, I'm still sort of waiting for that to begin to take more shape. The main thing is the trying to overcome the ice. And I don't know if this prophecy isn't even real. I don't know about opening that thing, if that's even going to help. I got no idea. So, yeah, I'm sort of sitting here just like... What's next? All right, guys. Well, thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I will be seeing you soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.